get started. So my name is Drake, and I'm here to talk today about how not to do a cloud migration. Weird topic, I know, but here's the reason why I pick it. There are so many services, so many offerings on AWS that I can't actually give you good advice because what you need is so specific. However, there are some big potholes on the road that everybody should avoid. So I'm going to cover a few of those. So my name is Drake Lundstrom. I'm a senior software engineer at Rogue Fitness, and I do a lot of app modernizations on Azure and AWS. I am planning on getting more AWS certs to put up there. I'm sorry. I'll get better. And I really love learning and teaching, so that's what I'm here to do, to see some cool sessions and talk to you guys about stuff that I've gone through. This presentation exists because the cloud is amazing and it is the future. It is what we are all using. It allows you to have variable cost, only pay for what you need. It allows you to have global scalability in minutes or hours instead of days or weeks. It is always available. It has increased security, better time to market, data loss prevention. It has all of these amazing features that we've all heard about, right? Here's the problem. They are all optional. It is possible to deploy the cloud without any of these features. The big problem that I have seen, literally to the point that I've seen companies do a cloud immigration, lead the cloud, is that doing a cloud migration badly will make your system worse. It can make it more expensive, less secure, have more problems. So it is important to do it well, to do it carefully, not just, oh, the cloud's great, let's lift and shift everything. So go through a bunch of common mistakes. The first one is moving forward without buy-in. Every technology decision is a business decision first. They are the people we are writing the code for. They're the people who pay for the code. They probably pay your salaries. If they're not on board, you're not going to have a good time. So it's very important when moving to the cloud that first you have a defined reason for where you're going and why you're going there. If you don't know why you're moving to the cloud, if you can't justify your decision to shareholders, you shouldn't be doing it. There are lots of great reasons. If you want to hear the reasons, attend this conference and you will hear all the reasons to move to the cloud, but you need to know them going in. And on top of that, it's important to remove some of the roadblocks in advance. You do not want to get halfway through a migration and have people stop paying the bills on your AWS account that your infrastructure now runs on. You need to get some buy-in in advance, remove the roadblocks, and then also look at who is going to be driving this forward. Are you going to be having an internal person in the company that is really the champion for AWS, or are you going to bring in outside consultants? How does this work from a business side? Because every technology decision is a business decision first. Next thing that comes up is cost. Again, I'm covering these a bit because developers don't always think about the business, but they do pay our bills. When you're on the cloud, costs work differently for a bunch of reasons. You're going to have the cost of the transition period of getting to the cloud, and then when you're on it, you have costs coming in every month. Yeah, I think bills monthly. Yeah, every month you have costs of the services that you're using. So make sure that people understand this. Say, hey, here is how much it's going to cost for transitioning, and then how much it's going to cost monthly going forward. It doesn't need to be perfect, but this is something that is important, and AWS has a bunch of amazing tools to do this. They have a free tool for doing migration assessments, which compare your current on-premises costs to the cost in the cloud. They have pricing calculators, so you can actually look at individual services and see how much they cost. There are free, great tools provided by AWS that will let you figure out your costs in advance to give people a ballpark. So do it. I just put my clicker in my pocket without noticing, so I can't click through slides. And then the other big thing is that costs work differently on the cloud. All of a sudden, a developer can deploy a service that runs for one weekend and costs you $1,000 without approval. And hopefully you'll get paid back if finance didn't know this is going to happen. Yeah, that can happen. I'm not going to say how much money I've accidentally spent in the test environment, but yeah, I'm not the worst. I'll put it that way. So have alerts, have rules, protect this, control deployment. We'll talk about pipelines briefly later, but those can be a way to stop this. And then also make sure to go through and trim unused resources. There are a lot of cost management tools in AWS. And honestly, just read your bills. If you read the bill, see all the resources deployed, you can go through and remove things you no longer need, because there's a test Elasticast instance up somewhere that nobody's using anymore that you can hopefully get rid of. The next big one is only doing a lift and shift. So let's say my husband just got a new laptop, but I love the cloud. I don't want him to have a new laptop. I want him to put it on the cloud. It's I think a Yoga Lenovo. It was like $800 or something. Not that bad. It has 16 gigs of RAM, 8 cores, general purpose laptop, and he uses it all month, right? So I'm just gonna lift and shift and replace it with a, what is it? EC2? No, it's not an EC2. Is it EC2? Workspace. Perfect. That. So put in the pricing calculator. Let's see how much it is. That's the size. That looks like, okay, that's 16 gigabytes, 8 cores. That looks like the right size instance. So I'm gonna, yeah. So we're gonna pay $225 a month to replace his $800 laptop. Doesn't seem like a good deal. If anybody would like to pay me $225 a month, I will sell you his laptop. If you give that to me for the next 2 years. Yeah, I could buy like 3 of those for that price. Because sometimes just doing a lift and shift, taking what you have and dropping in the cloud doesn't make sense because the cloud operates based off efficiencies. Where traditionally, you need to have enough server allocation, enough compute to match your highest peak and then have some bandwidth. So you'd be paying for all this compute under the yellow or under the orange line all the time. With the cloud, what you can do is have your AWS allocated compute match the compute needs. So that's where you're saving the cost. If you were replacing his laptop all the time, it costs a lot of money. If you're only replacing it the 10% of the time he's on the laptop, it's a really good deal. So there's this concept of 6 R's of cloud migration that I'll run through. This is an article it came from, but there's a lot of other things covering like 5 or 6 R's, different formats of it. But it is a cool concept. So first one is rehost. And this is the 6 R's we're going to go through evaluating each application when you do a migration to the cloud. So rehost, that is the lift and shift. Pick up the whole house with the foundations, drop it in a new hole. Boom, you're on the cloud. You did it. You're cloud native, right? Yeah. So this is a really good first step so that you're on the cloud and you can start individually changing and migrating services from there. It is good as a first step, but it's definitely not where you want to stop because this is usually what caused the most cost. However, it can reduce some cost or reduce things like management. Like all of a sudden you don't need security guards watching your physical servers and things like that. Next step is replatform. Let's go through and do minimal changes. So let's take an application and Dockerize it and then put it on ACS, what is it? AWS Container Service. So that lets you just change the outside, but not actually change the code. Or put something in a platform as a service managed database. And these things are big cost savings with very little software work, very little changes. Or even just adding load balancers, different services, adding basic scaling. These are going to be big savings, big efficiencies with minimal code changes. The next one is refactoring. Sometimes your design is just ugly and it should be gotten rid of. You all know this story about, okay, I'm a nerd. There's a whole thing about the Sonic movie. Look it up if you're interested. They redid the design because it was bad. Sometimes your application is just, it's old, it's ugly, it never made sense in the first place, but you were in a hurry, it's really expensive. Let's just get rid of it and remake it and refactor and improve it. And while you're doing cloud migration, you get to look at each item and evaluate it. It's similar to moving houses. When you're moving houses, you see everything and you're like, wow, this toaster's never worked. Let's just leave it and buy a new one kind of thing. So this is the step, and honestly, this is most of what my job is to refactor applications and make them more effective in the cloud. Move something to, I don't know, Lambda functions, something serverless, or different types of architectures. And then, of course, there is repurchase. So there's a great TED Talk about a person who tried to build a toaster from scratch. He's like, okay, I see these $25 toasters in Walmart. How hard could it be, you know? So he spent 9 months and made every single part of this lovely toaster from scratch. If I remember right, I think it ran for like 10 seconds before shorting out. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I was working at a company and they were trying to build a live streaming application and they wanted to do all their streaming services themselves. It was a bit of a dumpster fire. And after 4 months, they decided to give up and switch over to, I believe it's IVS, the Amazon video service that was way better. It was cheaper. It was fast. It already did all the features that they wanted and had us building. It already did for the same price. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can just use the wheels that are already there. And when you use software as a service applications, what you get is that you get somebody else maintaining them, updating them, paying upkeep costs, adding security features. You don't need to build your own email server. You don't need to build your own Excel from scratch. Some things you just buy prepackaged, and AWS has a lot of really great prepackaged software service things. I mean, even the level of getting something like CodeWisp or AWS Q is a LLM already made for you. It makes some things to buy things pre-made. And then retire. My favorite button on the keyboard is the delete key. Some applications do not deserve to keep running. You don't use them anymore. Nobody uses them anymore. They're expensive. When you're moving them over one by one, that is when you decide, not you stay and get left behind. So it is important to actually decide, does this application have value or not? And then the final R is revisit it. Sometimes there's an application and it works. It's really finicky though, so getting on the cloud will be a nightmare, and it's an older language, but it's an important legacy application. It has medical information that we can't transfer due to privacy concerns. Let's just leave it. We can come back in 3 years after we're better at the cloud and do it then. You don't need to move every part of your infrastructure at once. You can just leave chunks for later. So, next big mistake, deploying everything through the portal. Is everybody here familiar? Raise your hand if you're familiar with infrastructure as code. Okay, majority of you, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. But yeah, AWS CloudFormation or Terraform, they are amazing. There is a reason that this is becoming the industry standard. There's also many other options like Jenkins, or even technically you could do bash scripts and things to do this. But running things programmatically, automatically, it reduces human error. It leads to faster deployment. You get all the benefits of Git, where you can be like, hey, who screwed this up? What's a previous version I want to go back to? It's also easy to scale. Instead of 5 hours redeploying all these new resources, you can just change one variable, boom, instant copy. 6 more. You can do that really easy with infrastructure as code. It is the gold standard for a reason, so make sure to, not everything is going to be on your infrastructure as code, but don't just do everything through the portal and assume it's going to be okay. If you really want to function well on the cloud, you have to be using some level of DevOps know-how. So another big one, shifting everything all at once. Gall's Law, I'm just going to read this verbatim since it's a really good quote about information theory. A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched up to make it work. You have to start over with a working simple system. What that says is I cannot build Facebook from scratch tomorrow and have it work on the first try. I know, you're all thinking I'm a superstar developer, like 10x or something. Yeah, I can't do that. It's impossible. Instead, I could build a profile picture display, and then names, and then accounts, and then a login, and then comments one by one, adding pieces individually. And that is really how systems work. You cannot just dump a bunch of stuff all at once and hope it all works together nicely. And if any of you guys doubt me, want to test this, really simple challenge. When you go into work tomorrow, or honestly probably Monday, you guys are not, I don't think we're going to be doing much work tomorrow. It's a Friday, like a single day in the week. So Monday, you go into work if you're a developer and sit down, start coding, and keep coding. And then at 5 p.m. or 4 p.m., run your code. Don't run it all day. Wait until you've been coding for like 7 or 8 hours, then try to run your code from the first time and see if it runs perfectly with no bugs. Yeah, that's a joke. That's never going to happen. Instead, what you do is you check often, check frequently, because these little bugs that break things pile up the longer you go. So how does that work with the cloud? It means you should first try to get one thing running before you try to migrate an entire enterprise scale system. And so make it iterative, make it agile, get one thing running, learn lessons about what you did wrong, what you did well, then get the next thing running one by one by one. And the big benefit of this is that if you have to stop halfway because, I don't know, prod caught fire and you need to go put it out, or because funding ran out, or some consultants got laid off, whatever else, you can stop halfway and still have a working product. I would much rather have you stop with a third of your applications running successfully on the cloud than have you stop with a third of your infrastructure set up, but nothing running on it. It is important to take vertical slices, get something working all the way through, learn from it, do the next thing one by one. Only two more. I'm getting there. So another big mistake is ignoring disaster recovery. People think, oh my, the cloud, it's so reliable, it's so perfect, it will never go down. You must assume, what was the quote? Assume everything breaks all the time. Am I getting it right? You're all dead. I shall make you do jumping jacks in advance. Okay, yeah, so assume that everything you're working with will break eventually, even if AWS doesn't, your code will. So have disaster recovery in place. So understand that it costs some money, but then you can have things replicate in different regions. There's a bunch of really cool disaster recovery features that are easy to implement on the cloud that you didn't have on premises. On premises, you can't have two data centers 200 miles apart with instant data transfer between them. On the cloud, that's actually simple and easy. So it's not that hard to do, but just be aware that this is necessary coming in, because sometimes you see people start setting things up without any disaster recovery, and that is its own disaster. But okay. That was bad. My jokes are all bad. I know. So, and my clicker is not working. There we go. Okay, then the final mistake is doing it alone. The same way that you would not have your electrician fix your plumbing, developers are not all cloud architects. You cannot be told, hey, developer, you've been doing this for 5 years on our system. Go to a cloud. It's not going to work. Some developers are those superstars and have done a bit of everything, but really make sure, and honestly, the people in the room, you're probably the people that are going to be hired to do this. I'm going to be honest, the people that show up to an AWS conference, but make sure that there is some voices in the room familiar with how the cloud works, how AWS works. There are 200 plus services on AWS. That's a lot. It's hard even knowing which service to use, not just how to set it up. So make sure to use the tools available and treat the cloud with respect. If somebody says, don't worry, we're going to lift and shift our whole application this week and everything will work perfectly, run. Yeah, that does not work. Make sure to give the cloud the respect it is due, especially if you want to do it well, if you want to pay less money, have more efficient products. And of course, my suggestion would be get one thing working, learn from it, rinse and repeat. The well-architected framework is also a really great tool going through what makes a good or a bad cloud migration. So that is essentially it. Here are my 8 things that I have. So move forward with buy-in, get team on board, plan to control cost. Don't just do a lift and shift, go all the way through all the steps. Make sure to use infrastructure as code when it makes sense. Start small, iterate, just true for everything in software. Waterfall is dying for a reason. Plan for resiliency, and then use experts, and of course, look at all the options on the service. There's a lot of cool things in AWS. There are cool things that come out. It feels like every week at this point, there are new things coming out. So don't just stick with the thing that you've been with for a while, which is kind of you bring an expert in to know that. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate being here, and I have time for questions. Finish right on time.
I can have the mic around.
Yeah, thank you. You guys are all still asleep, I think. This mic still works, right? Nice.
Hi. Do you think the organization will encounter any hidden cost even after having a detailed plan for migration?
Always yes. just there's always going to be hidden cost, but also there's also some level of you're going to have hidden ways to reduce cost more than you thought. Because especially one of the big things you run into with the cloud is that it reveals costs that you didn't know existed because things are broken down. When you have a big server running locally, you don't realize some dumb application for counting inventory is using 30% of your CPU. On the cloud, you actually see that. So budget and say this is an estimate plus or minus 30%, but over time, you're actually going to get to reduce those hidden costs because now you have visibility. The cloud provides transparency for costs that are not there on premises because everything's running on one black box server in the mailroom.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to. No more questions? You guys know everything?
How do you make like best case pitch for like upper management or people for decision makers who are going to be making, hey, whether or not we're actually going to do this, is this, how do you go from, well, we're not in the cloud right now, we could save money, but we could also spend a lot of money in, getting them past that fear?
So I think that's also one of the things where doing a small version works. If you can get one thing on the cloud and you can actually, it's hard to convince somebody to move their whole enterprise to the cloud. It's not that hard to convince them to move one application over to Lambda functions. So that's kind of really what I've seen work is get something up and show that it works. So you get a couple people on board, you get enough funding for the first year or two, and then you take the worst working application, you put it on a Lambda function, you cut its costs by 50%, and then you're showing how things work. In some organizations also, it is a thing where actually you have management pushing you to do it because they understand everybody's talking about the cloud. It's the future. They just don't know how to do it or what it means. So sometimes you run into that where people people are excited about AI right now, and they don't even know how to use AI in their business. So with the cloud, it's a similar thing. A lot of times people actually want to move to the cloud, but just don't even know what that means. I've not been as much on the business side to convince. Normally, I've been a consultant and I've been brought in after somebody already wants to use the cloud, and now I need to tell them it's not magic. We'll get there, but it takes a little bit. So, hope that answers your question, kind of. One over there.
Hi, not so much of a question, but just rather something to add to the don't column is don't neglect the skills gap. It's kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room where you have to acknowledge that there's a huge difference between running workloads, say, on VMware on-prem and managing modernized workloads in AWS. So consider that when you're talking to people, and also keep the human element of that in mind, that people are likely going to be scared and feel threatened about all this new technology and their jobs substantially changing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and definitely it's something we've seen. There are sometimes if you have a really solid DevOps team and they containerize applications well, you don't really see that transfer because, hey, I just run a different npm command to start it. Instead, I use Docker Compose up. But definitely, especially when done poorly, your job can change drastically overnight, and all of a sudden you don't know how anything works, and your logs are all broken and missing, which, yeah, that's why you don't do it alone.
Getting my steps in today.
Mine's not really a question either. I'm actually... from his question in the middle there about the upper management discussions, I wouldn't really go for the cost angle. I would maybe talk about more of the benefits otherwise going for cloud. Talk about agility, talk about other advantages to scale up, scale down, that type of thing inside the cloud versus your cost. That's more likely going to be more of a winning point for you than going straight cost discussions with them.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not awake either. It's still early, but definitely talking about, hey, you can scale globally. Your application is going to be faster. Users are not going to see you have a crash every 2 weeks or the website being down for maintenance. Those kind of things are definitely big selling points. Yeah, one more, or we can let the next person start setting up early. Don't want to take all his time. Okay, then I think you're all good. Thank you so much. Hope it was informative. And I will obviously be around all day.